blast from the grassroots, connecting people and sharing ideas.
Hi, this is Arlene and Gowri. Today in our Blast from the Grassroots, we have a guest. He is the founder of PUSAKA. His name is Eddin Khoo. He'll be sharing with us on a question that we rarely ask, what it is in tradition. We often talk about national unity as the backbone pillar of what makes us Malaysian, and the importance of Bangsa Malaysia as an identity to unite us all together. But we fail to see Malaysia is also a very multicultural society. They are diverse race, culture, religion, ethnicity, and also beliefs that makes us unique as Malaysians. Understanding this diversity and appreciating the variety within our society is important. Hence, we have PUSAKA, an organization that has been embarking on a journey of upholding and appreciating and understanding this diversity for more than 20 years. Eddin Khoo will be sharing with us on tradition and how can we, as Malaysian, appreciating our own identity by discovering how diverse our tradition is.
You said you have 21 master performers from all over Malaysia.
Yes.
So what are some of the key performers or some of the performers that you want to highlight?
Well, we've got, as I said, people from, that represent all the forms of traditional performance. Popular traditional forms such as the Boria from Penang, Ghazal Party from Kedah, ritual traditions such as the Kuda Kepang and the Mak Yong and Wayang Kulit from Kelantan. We've got a great traditional rock band from Sarawak called the...
What do you mean by traditional rock
Well,
band?
they play rock music, but they use lots of traditional instrumentation like the sape and so on from Sarawak. They sound like Midnight Oil, the great Australian rock band, and they're really quite marvelous. So we've got them. We've got a Sumazau troupe playing the Kulintangan, doing the Sumazau dance from Sabah, and they come from quite the interiors in Sabah. So we've been able to gather all these people. We've got storytellers, Awang Batil from Perlis, Tarik Selampit from Kelantan, and then we have the great Teochew puppetry lady from Penang, and our Indian temple drummers. So there's really a wide array of performances. Each of them perform for half an hour. So you get a sense of basically what's there.
As far as I'm concerned, this Awang Batil, Tarik Selampit, they are almost to the point of being extinct. How did you manage to find these people?
Well, it's what I've been doing for 23 years.
Okay.
Going around looking for these people. And yeah, they are at the point, like the Tarik Selampit, we didn't even know one existed. But eventually through, community networks and you begin to talk, some of them have actually given up, and then PUSAKA's been able to lure them to coming back and performing these traditions again. The Awang Batil he's kind of a genius performer. He can do a whole variety of things, play music wonderfully. He's a great instrumentalist, and then of course a storyteller. He's the last of his line, but we're hoping to be able to, do something to pass it down to someone younger.
What is interesting in Malaysia is the multiculturalism. You have all the different culture and all that, and you manage to get all these people that are doing arts that we never heard before. People from the urban area. Why do you think there is very lack of understanding of the cultures, the variety of cultures in this country?
Yeah, cultural performance traditions are one of the best ways really to look at the innate diversity of Malaysia. I don't like the term multiculturalism so much. It's a kind of recent sociological term, but the essence of our diversity can be really gleaned, can be seen through these traditional performances. And what we actually do perceive is actually how complex Malaysia is, because you can talk about Malay performance traditions, you can talk about Chinese performance traditions and Indian performance traditions, but when you begin to look at them, you will see really how diverse even one community is within itself. For example, the Malays, the Malays are always so fascinating to me because, you can literally divide them by region, by district, by coastline, and each of these, basically the differences encapsulate an entire a distinct history, a distinct lineage, so for me, even when we talk about diversity, we haven't even begun to talk about how actually diverse things are in Malaysia until we look at them in very intricate ways. And performance traditions are one of the best ways to do that.
What about diversity within other groups, other minority groups in this country?
No, that exists too. For example, one of the reasons I was very keen to get the Teochew puppet master was because, as you know, with the Chinese community, there's a lot of Mandarinization of the Chinese community, and people have started to forget to talk, how to speak their own dialects, Teochew, Hakka, all these things are really petering out, and people have less consciousness of this kind of
Unlike the
thing.
Hokkiens and the Cantonese, where they form the majority in certain
Yeah,
areas.
I mean, I was quite interested that in Penang, Baba Hokkien, has become almost a cause for you to make people aware of the uniqueness of Baba Hokkien, because less and less people are actually speaking it.
They have their own.
They speak
movement?
Mandarin.
Oh, they
So as I said, Mandarinization of the Chinese community has begun to basically, depart from the essential diversity of the Chinese community itself. It's the same with the Indians as well. I mean,
Does this attempt to sort of form a certain distinct identity of a certain of different racial groups in Malaysia? For example, the Malay has to be like this, of this culture, and speak of this language well, and the same with Indian and Chinese. But at the same time, if you look at the bigger picture, even within certain communities, like you mentioned about the Teochew, there are so many diverse languages, culture, and even attitudes. Like you cannot just say, oh, this is a Chinese attitude. Like different culture have different way of understanding how to lead a life of their own. And when it comes to tradition, what are the different unique traditions that you have observed throughout your years working in Pusaka?
No, we have lots of unique traditions, but one of the things that you were talking about, that performance culture dispels, basically is one of the effects of our communities being shaped in that way, more and more homogenous, right? Everybody is like, yeah.
Either you are in this box or
Exactly.
that box.
Well, it's a result of racial politics. So that each race needs to identify itself with certain idealizations. So, things like regional diversity, linguistic diversity are not good for unity within that community. Same with the Chinese, which is why Mandarin is such, associated with the whole Chinese school issues and all that. So if you ask me, it's a throwback of racial politics. But I think that's beginning to have less and less meaning, and I think people within that community, each community, specific community, are looking for deeper roots. For me, there are so many, every single one of our traditions is unique in its own way, because almost every single community, in every single locale, in every single state, in every single coastline, has a very distinct and separate history. I am worried mostly about our culture of sameness. It's that like everything is the same everywhere these days. If you go, whether you go into Batu Pahat or you go into Teluk Intan or you go into Kanga, you look at the landscape of our towns are all the same when they never used to be. We have everything from distinct ways of constructing houses to distinct ways of shaping landscape.
Not every developer want to do
it's the same thing.
apartments and
Ugly
condominiums.
pink, green or yellow buildings, right? It's all the same, in the same kind of boxed way. This to me is very worrying, because it kills your soul. Yeah.
Interesting. What about the older generation that you meet? Like, what is their concern about the future of tradition, whatever tradition that they are passing up?
Well, the older generation are always concerned, of course, that their history is being lost. And they're right, of course, because they see nothing coming from the young, apart from, lots of activity on social media that mean nothing. Whereas they're concerned, basically, that people are not looking at culture as a way of really defining themselves as a people.
But why younger generation?
Well, I think younger generation are distracted. But, saying that, of course, our troops, a lot of the participants in our troops are young. if you look at our Kudakapang troupe, I mean, the average age is about 25, So there is also a great deal of rising interest. In my Wayang Kulit troupe, my master musician, one of my genius drummers there is 13 years old.
Oh.
Right? So
13
one of the,
years
yeah,
old.
of
Barely
course.
even.
One of the things that PUSAKA has done over the past 5 or 6 years, of course, is to draw young people from within these communities
But you
into
know,
involvement.
But like certain culture, they are being restricted by the government. For example, those in Kelantan and in Terengganu.
By the past government.
By the past government. But what about cultures that are not being restricted by the government, but they are just but the young people are just simply losing interest in it? For example, I still remember my dad told me in Alstar they used to have these opera performances by the Chinese community, but it's no longer there.
Yeah, well, these things go in cycles. I don't mean to downplay that many of these traditions are in danger of being lost, but what I'm saying is at the same time, there is a rising interest among the young because a lot of the young really feel a hole in their soul, The issue of proscription or, bans is prominent in Kelantan, but as you know, we've been working there for 23 years with no problems from the administration. We also have bans of other, proscription fatwas and so on of other traditions such as the Dabus and the Kudakapang and all that. But I think when community solidarity is strong, then these kinds of edicts don't have such a place, you see, within those communities because those communities understand what the traditions are.
So whenever they receive like threats by the government, what would they do? What would they respond?
Well, so far we've not received any threats. I think I've always argued this about what needs to be done for culture in this country is to seriously intellectualize it, so that every time you have, and most of these edicts anyway are rooted in very strange language,
Really?
and it's really not impossible to counter that kind of language if you have the proper knowledge to do so.
Should we follow suit how Indonesia is doing in terms of preserving their culture?
Oh no! I think we should really not go the Indonesia way because I think people talk a lot about Indonesian culture, which of course is wonderful, and of course we have a fragment of Indonesian culture here. We have strong Javanese influence, we have strong Buginese influence, and so on. And very interesting here because it's eccentric, right? It's not from the center. It develops and it evolves on its own temperament. It's not really a fusion, but it has, it takes some things, it doesn't take other things. And it's not such a grand scale and so on. Indonesian culture, of course, has become highly politicized. I mean, all through the Sukarno years and Suharto years, and highly institutionalized. So if you take Javanese traditions, for example, I have tremendous admiration for Indonesian traditions. Of course, I've studied them. I've gone and seen so many things, but I'm always more partial to the Malaysian side because I think we are a lot more eccentric.
When you say it is highly politicized, meaning what do you mean by it?
Well, Suharto used the gamelan, to advance a certain Javanese-ness of Indonesia and, to build a lot of his own political mystique around it. You had dalangs associated with the New Order, Golkar, and so on. And their performance style, of course, is very regimented. It's not as wild and as kind of improvised as us in Malaysia.
But if you look at Indonesia, right, they actually have schools and universities dedicated to passing on the knowledge, whereas in Malaysia it's more of like a father passing down to son things. Do you think that we should maybe start having schools?
No. We must not have schools. I mean, we already have schools. We have Aswara. We have universities that UITM and all that have, but they do it so badly. And what happens, of course,
But your criticism is the processes. It's not so much. But what about if they have?
I think the processes are inevitable. Okay. And the moment you create some kind of institution for the housing of culture, this will definitely happen. A bureaucratization of the culture will happen, right? And then you will have all kinds of,
but what is the best way? What is the way that you would prescribe in terms of preserving a culture and without politicizing it?
Go into communities, begin to work with them, with communities, and leave them alone. I just wish people would leave people alone. When people are left alone, they know how to get along and they know how to do things. These traditions have never had, royal patronage. They've never had, aristocracy patronage. They are community performances. They exist and they thrive and they change and they improvise according to their own context on their own. Leave them alone is what I say.
Has development somehow threatened them? Progressiveness or modernization, especially post Mahathir era?
Modernity came to Malaysia with the British. Actually, modernity came to Malaysia with the Malacca Sultanate. The moment we became an entrepot and opened our borders to trade and everything, we were already modern. Our traditions are folk and community traditions, which means they are not classicized and highly codified, right? As they are in Indonesia and they are in Thailand. So there's been a great deal of versatility for change and so on. The problem with modernity that we have, of course, is the institutionalization of culture that comes with things like nationhood, that comes with the emergence of government departments and universities who feel the need to, somehow museumize all these cultures. And for me, that is something we really need to get away from. Communities need to be autonomously supported and just left alone. And there's a reason why we call them masters of these traditions, because they are the masters.
So the most that the government can do is provide funding.
Provide
resources.
or structures, and more important than that, actually, it's also to allow communities to build their own structures, to explore their own structures within their own setting and within their own context. It is, the bureaucratization of culture in this country over the past 30 and 40 years has been the most destructive thing upon traditional culture.
Within Southeast Asia, which best practices of example that you can give in terms of how the society and the government managed to preserve a culture and without politicizing it as much or bureaucratizing it as much?
There is no example. I think when there are, the modern nation state has been very, very inimical, has been a very negative influence, I think, upon culture, because it feels the need to constantly shape it according to what national aspirations are. But culture is not like that. Culture is totally independent of any kind of need to box it up and categorize it. But I think, the more we leave people alone, so that they are, performance traditions are essentially creative impulses. And creative impulses need to operate on the basis of freedom and liberty, right? Not by some, intrusive force coming in and telling people what they can do and what they cannot do.
What are the challenges that PUSAKA has faced throughout your 20 years being founding and managing it? Is the challenges more so in terms of dealing with the communities or dealing with, the urban society itself?
There are challenges on both fronts. I mean, one of the things with dealing with local communities, of course, is when we come in to do our work research and of course, to also bring in, finance and issues like that, we have to introduce all kinds of administrative structures that don't exist when you're working simply within a village. But we've been able to work that out over the past 20 years. The larger problem, of course, is creating an awareness, because Malaysians, somehow they have had very little sense of who they are and where they come from, and for a very long time they didn't care very much.
And in fact, for the urban community, they see this culture as a form of exotifying, like looking at Mak Yong is like, wow, this is a very exotic culture, whereas it's a culture that is supposed to be part of the identity.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things that used to really irritate me when we first started this work was whenever you brought demonstration performances of this kind, basically to instruct on what our cultural legacy and lineage is. You used to get a lot of sentimentality, which is a very reflective of middle class indulgence, lazy middle class attitudes. You get sentimentality. But I've noticed over the past 3 years or so, we get a lot more people who are deeply interested in discovering what these things are, whose approach to it as an exoticism is no longer as obvious. I think people are actually a lot more intent now on
In
discovering
the past,
what these things
what were their reactions that irritates you that much?
Well, sentimentality. It's just kind of like, oh, why have we lost this? And, when I was a child, I used to watch this in the Padang or whatever it is, and spare me all that, really. But I think more recently, we've been able to, for example, get a lot of very interesting questions and very interesting participation from especially younger Malays, actually, who are very interested in exploring these traditions to get a deeper insight into what their culture is and how diverse Malay culture innately is.
How the exposure of these traditions that we have throughout the years has somehow changed the identity of the younger generation?
Which younger generation are we talking about now?
Today's younger generation.
What, in general, or the
In
younger generation in the communities and younger generation in the urban?
I guess both the local communities as well as the urban.
Well, one of the things PUSAKA has been able to do is really elevate many of these traditions onto a national platform on an independent space. Yeah, independent space. We've also had lots of interest internationally. Because I think all these traditions encapsulate many challenging questions for the world today. How what is diversity and how do you perceive diversity? And we have been diverse from the very beginning, and we don't know other reality. But we are just
not aware of it.
Yeah, we've been made not aware, and we should be more aware. But nobody's very interested these days in really digging into history and looking at our geography and looking at all these factors. We just have very twee and stupid opinions we want to express very quickly as soon as possible. But what I'm trying to say is, young people, I think, have discovered that there is a whole in their being, and they're looking to things beyond their syllabuses and their school structures to ask very deep questions about not so much who they are yet, but where they come from.
So for them to be exposed more about where they come from, they can also go to the event which will be happening this weekend.
Yeah, the event is not, is also, one of the things about these traditions, of course, it's it's on the one hand extremely weighty. It is heavy with content, deep intellectual content. On the other hand, it's also very vibrant, and you can have a lot of fun, really, because the rhythms are just so infectious, and the traditions are very irresistible.
So will there be any Q&A in case they want to ask you some deep questions about culture and tradition?
Oh, no. They'll just have to follow us for next events. I mean, this is essentially a showcase, and each troop has only got about half an hour to basically give a sense of what their traditions are all about. But of course, with PUSAKA, there's continuity after that.
So where this whole event will be held?
At the KL Pack.
KL Pack.
Yeah.
And it will be a 2-day event between which day to which day?
On Saturday the 13th and Sunday the 14th.
So in conjunction with Malaysia Day, we also have, we also want to gauge with all our speakers about their ideal Malaysia. And so what is your ideal Malaysia, and what your wishes towards our fellow Malaysians?
I think I've been talking about our ideal Malaysia for 25 years without ever seeming to get there. And we seem to be saying these things every single year. For me, what is my ideal Malaysia? Essentially, a Malaysia that is rooted in freedom, in liberty, in our ability to appreciate each other, and really get a sense of how complex we are as a nation. I am not one of those who comes up with national platitudes about unity and all these kinds of things. I think there's a lot of work to be done for a nation to become a nation. So I think its citizenry have to be less lazy and less willing to accept, platitudes in the name of what our nation should or should not be.
So with that, thank you very much, Eddin Khoo.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.